Welcome to another Cyber Collective podcast. As always, my name's Elliot Cito. I am the solutions consultant for security here, as well as now an executive coach in the academy team. And as always, we're joined by two of our special guests, an SME, to talk about the topic at hand, which is around Sass-ee. Welcoming Joe Saunders from Perimeter 81, and also Milan. I can't pronounce your name, Milan, so I'm going to let you do that as part of the intro for yourself. Who brings our MSP perspective, our MSP lens. I might start with you, Joe. You mind doing a bit of introduction about yourself and Perimeter 81?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Elliot. We appreciate you having me on today. Looking forward to having the conversation here. And for those who don't know me, I'm Joe Saunders. So I'm a channel partner manager with Perimeter 81. So we are a zero trust network access cloud company. And I'm running the partner distribution channel. And I've spent about the last 17 years working with partners through various different organizations in the channel, and looking forward to helping partners learn more about Sass-ee. I think there's going to be a huge shift in the market coming in the next couple of years. I'm already starting to see that. And yeah, it's a little bit about me. I'm based in Denver, Colorado, and I cover most of the globe when it comes to our distribution with Perimeter 81 and Checkpoint.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe, and welcome. Milan, how about yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name's Milan. I am the CEO of Otto IT here in Australia. I have been in IT now for 22 years. So I've seen a lot of transitions from since we were box pushers to where we are now as specializing in cybersecurity services with our managed services. But I've been using Sass-ee now for a year now, so I feel like I can talk quite a bit about it. So thanks for letting me come on for this show, and appreciate it.
No, thank you for joining. You're probably running into the same problems that I do, Milan, that no one believes that you've been around this long because you still look like a baby. But no, with someone with your experience, this is where these type of things come in, really around educating the partners. So let's get into it. So obviously today's topic is around Sass-ee solutions. We might sort of touch a bit on zero trust that Joe mentioned around what Perimeter 81 do today. But this is really just around exploring options around how Sass-ee can maybe be used in the MSP world, particularly for SMB clients. So let's start with my first question. I'm going to start with Joe. What is Sass-ee? Just to sort of set the scene for everyone out there that actually doesn't know what that technology is.
Yeah, yeah. So thanks, Elliot. So Sass-ee is a cloud delivered service to where we have VPN points of presence scattered throughout the world, because traditional VPNs were not really built for remote work. And what we're doing here with Sass-ee is we're protecting remote workforces and users that are traveling by connecting them securely back into the home network and into the cloud applications. So it's combining things like a VPN, web gateway, a cloud firewall, things like CASB and DLP and application protection, all into one single solution that's helping wrap security around users that need to connect securely back to the network. And since COVID, we've seen a huge explosion in the market because workers are no longer behind the firewall in the office, and really the network has become the cloud today. And most even enterprises today are running hybrid networks. So they've got maybe some services running on-prem, some in the cloud, some SMBs are purely running in the cloud. And there's a solution, and usually Sass-ee is a good common use case for these MSPs and SMBs and even mid-market and commercial customers to help protect these remote users. So in a nutshell, that's how I see Sass-ee.
Yeah, no, that's a really good breakdown, because I think there's a misconception out there that Sass-ee is basically just the cloud-based firewall, and it's not. There's a whole lot more we can do on the back of it. Milan, you're using Sass-ee today, as you mentioned, for the last year or so now. How has that impacted your business? Is that improved it in terms of capabilities and features and functionality?
Yeah, look, I think that so in two cases, we use it internally, and we have been since we became ISO 27001 certified. It allowed us to obtain that certification with much greater ease, so to speak. So that was like one real benefit that we saw, and that's when we started using it. And since that, we actually started using it with our clients, and what we've noticed is that we actually had a reduction of labor-intensive calls when people were working in a hybrid or remote situation. So it's part of our go-to-market strategy now. So what I mean by that is that in Australia, there's a lot of people that still work hybrid. We still have 2 days in, 3 days out, or 3 days in, 2 days out. And securing those environments from home has just been an absolute disaster since COVID. And we just don't have any control really over what's happening at the user's residential property. So SASE for us has been the game changer in that element. It's been allowing us to enforce the level of security that we need to have for our clients with very minimal impact to the actual surrounding environment at their house. So we've jumped full on it onto SASE now, and that's one of our key things that we deliver.
Yeah, fantastic. What would you think the main contributor is to the lower ticket rate? I guess the labor costs.
I think it's just because a lot of the times when we'd have people working from home or at an airport and they're calling in and going, "Hey, we can't get onto these resources," it's always something to do with the VPN not working correctly, right? Since we've put in SASE, it's just been auto on. It connects automatically. It works out. If it can't get to one endpoint, it's going to go to another endpoint. And it just works, right? It's one of those technologies that I've put in, and I'm actually quite shocked on how it actually does just work. And that's just reduced the phone calls. Like if someone's going to an airport in Sydney for example, and they need to use different endpoints for the VPN, it just does it by itself. We don't have to do it. It just works. That's the best part of it, I think.
Yeah, that is, I guess, one of the main benefits, particularly in those situations where you still got a hybrid workforce, either work from home or traveling quite a bit. Not only does it add the security layer into it and basically automate a lot of that structure, but it gives you the capabilities of, I guess, redundancy as well, right? You're not now relying on a single network for the most part. You've got access to a broad range of POPs and wider network across the globe. So wherever you're located, it's going to tap into the most appropriate one. Are you seeing those type of similar situations, examples in your world, Joe?
Absolutely. Yeah. So everything Milan mentioned really resonated with me. With work from home, I mean, I think that was the biggest challenge is how do you protect the network? And, we're able to have Wi-Fi protection in with these SASE solutions to encrypt all of that traffic back to the network. And to your point, these POPs are regional. So with a traditional VPN, you're typically setting up an on-premise VPN appliance on site, and then you're relying on the upstream internet carriers traffic back to those home offices. Whereas with these SASE solutions, we've gone out and bought private circuits, built out a private backbone. So you can think of us as the Autobahn highway on the internet of getting back to the home offices and the corporate network, and even into the public cloud with all the bandwidth we're providing. So to Milan's point, that's one of the biggest key drivers is the reduction in tickets, because we've been using VPNs the same way for the last 20 years. And it's always been a terrible employee experience when it comes to connectivity. And it's been a big burden on IT administrators taking those support ticket calls and users losing out on the productivity when they're working on the road. So I see this is a huge game changer for the industry, and would agree with everything Milan's saying here.
Yeah, awesome. I guess they have to sort of try it out for themselves to see some of the differences there. But I see it as being a consolidated solution as well. Typically, in that world, you're probably sort of smashing together 3, 4, maybe more types of solution to get the kind of same benefits that you would out of a SASE-based solution. This next question is a little bit of I guess, a tricky one because depending on who you ask, they'll say, the answer will be different. I'll start with Milan on this one. Is your SASE solution, the way you guys use it, is it a replacement for your firewalls, your dedicated firewalls at your client site, whether that be hardware or software-based firewalls?
That is a very interesting question, and this is one that I heavily debate in my office quite often. I have opposing views on this.
I'm sure you do.
So basically, if we find that a client has a significant amount of staff that work in hybrid, and if their internet connection is decent enough in the office location, then this is controversial. I'd probably say that you don't need to have a firewall in the office if there is no infrastructure to protect in the office. If there's no servers, if there's nothing, like it's just if the office is effectively a larger network to get to the internet, and that team works in hybrid quite often, then there's no need to actually have the additional hardware for no reason. So that's a bit controversial. But I would also say that in situations where there is infrastructure in an office, like a server or a web app or something that's going to be published to the outside world, then yes, you need to have a firewall. But I think you can't really, I don't know if you can necessarily have one answer to that question. I think you need to look at every scenario case by case, which is what we do here. There are some situations where we just don't have firewalls in client sites now. Controversially, I'm going to say that our office doesn't have a firewall. And that's because we don't have anything in the building that needs to be protected, right? Everything that we have,
everything's in the cloud these days.
Everything's hosted in Azure, and then you have this capability within the SASE product to, when you connect into the POP, you then have an IPsec straight into Azure. So we don't have to connect another VPN to get into our network. We don't need to have a firewall doing a site-to-site VPN, because that's technically a site-to-site VPN is unsecure as soon as you leave the building and there's no one in there and someone has access to hit the Wi-Fi at night. So we've actually technically become more secure by not having a firewall in our office, as ironic as that sounds.
No, that's very interesting. And before I get to Joe's points on that, I completely agree with you. I think it's a case by case scenario. I think I've debated this with Joe previously as well as part of our conversations. But to my mind, yes, if you have servers, if you have infrastructure you're trying to protect at a particular site, that's where absolutely you should still have a dedicated firewall for the most part. I think where SASE is really beneficial is in those hybrid type scenarios, or in the situation where you've got sort of small remote offices located around your local region, instead of having additional hardware that you have to then maintain and manage and configure for the most part. A SASE-based solution fits in there that can sort of tap back into your firewall infrastructure and create that layer of security that you're looking for as part of that. Joe, your thoughts on that?
Actually, very, very similar to what Milan said. If there's maybe some branch offices and you've got some simple networking equipment, maybe some printers and a router, and there's no infrastructure, that's a perfect use case for eliminating that appliance at that site. Many organizations are doing things in a legacy fashion where they've got a hardware at every branch location that's got a site-to-site VPN back to the home office. We can really kind of eliminate some of that hardware and some of the complexity behind managing an environment like that, and also secure the users as well. So I think there are some benefits of a SASE solution versus a traditional VPN. So with a traditional VPN, there's a different way of authenticating. There's no identity integration, so we can create an experience for that user that's an always-on VPN, where it integrates with Azure ID or their identity provider. So no matter where they're at, the VPN always connects, and the authentication experience is very, very smooth for those users. So I see that as a common use case to eliminate the complexity and to get rid of some of the hardware, but I never would lead with it as a firewall replacement. But to Milan's point, most of these solutions, and ours in particular, we've got direct connections into all the public cloud providers, Google, AWS, Azure, and all of our bandwidths included. So it can sometimes replace a direct connect, and you might just need maybe an Azure firewall set up and go completely cloud. That's what we're seeing happen today. And what I see is the big transition in the market as we're starting to see resources move from on-prem to the cloud, and these hybrid environments come together. So,
Okay, well, I think that settles the argument, well, for the most part anyway. But as part of the reason for asking that is we move from a sales perspective, obviously getting rid of potentially those having to manage those hardware-based firewalls or cloud-based firewalls. That moves most things from a Capex type scenario where we've had to deal with hardware, maintaining that, replacing that over the years, into now an Opex model, which really works for in an MSP world, where the way they sell, where they contract. Have you seen differences there? Have you seen a better uptake of or an easier transition into that, Milan, based on moving into that kind of Opex model?
Yeah, our structure has been to do everything as a service, and it has been to do that for 5+ years now. We really embraced the whole as a service concept when it started. We actually haven't sold an actual firewall in 5 years. We've sold the firewall as a service on-prem. So we would always kind of just take the Capex ourselves, amortize it over a period, and then lease out the equipment. Basically, a lot of people would call it hardware as a service, right? And that was a lot more digestible by our clients. Like some of our clients in Australia, like you have certain, once you hit certain revenue numbers, you become considered a larger entity by the Australian Tax Office, and then you can't actually write off some purchases immediately. So by delivering it as a service, and it becomes an Opex expense for the business, it actually makes more financial sense for them to actually take on the new service. Whereas you're trying to argue, oh, you're going to invest $10,000 in this firewall. It may only last 3 years based on your growth that you're doing at the moment. So you're going to have to basically write it off over 3 years and then go through another Capex expense. Like that whole argument just kind of goes, right? And then, so we've been transitioning everything to an Opex expense for a client for 5 years. We see that as the only way forward. It lowers the barrier of entry for a client. So it allows us to implement a higher level of security a lot quicker because they're not having to do such a large upfront investment. And ultimately, our goal here as an MSP is to just remove as many things that could be an issue from the client side. We believe in that whole concept of less is more. So if there's less to manage and there's less to potentially break, then there's not as many things are going to go wrong. The moment you start trying to layer things upon, like technologies upon technologies upon technologies, you start having this situation where you go, well, what broke in the stack that caused that problem? And then you got to work that out. We want to remove that and keep our tech stack as lean as possible, but still deliver what we need to deliver as a cybersecurity house. And ultimately, a SASE product allows us to do that on a monthly model. Like we're only talking about the secure access part right now, like the VPN part, but like you can go deeper and you can go to the filtering, the custom routing, the DNS filtering, like every technology that you need to like get 7 different products on to do, you do it right. I don't know if that was a long-winded way of answering that question, but yeah.
No, that breaks it down pretty well. So are you purely using it for the secure access at the moment, and are you like you're not using some of the features that are
No,
available?
we use everything.
Oh, right. Okay.
We've consolidated, like I think it was 4 products into one when we made the move, and that's less overhead on the endpoint too, right? That's 4 agents now down to 1. So less overhead there, less things that can break, less training for our staff because we're not now having to cross-train on different solutions. It just becomes easier all around. And that I think that's one of the biggest issues in this industry right now. We've overcomplicated it so much that you go far out. Where do I start?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things we talk about quite a bit is trying to consolidate your stack, and I think this is why I wanted to have this chat today. I think Sass-ee is one of those solutions that can help, bridge a lot of different components that MSPs may or probably should be using for the most part, and hopefully brings down that cost for a large part of it, so that you can actually deliver these. Because when you start looking at layered security, right? Yeah, you got a firewall in there, but there's all these different things that you could be putting in, and a lot of, I guess, smaller MSPs struggle with that, whether it's due to time and resources or costs. I think a SASE solution can sort of bring it all together and give them the capabilities now to roll that out. It is still fairly new technology, I would say, in the market, but it is something that probably will grow, particularly with all the events happening at the moment, or the incidents, not just across Australia but across the world. How have your team taken it up, Milan? In terms of education, you say it's sort of reduced the costs there, reduced the time to sort of go to market because of those bits and pieces. Is this something that was an easy transition for them to sort of learn how SASE works, or did it take a little bit longer than traditional?
It's like anything that you kind of go bleeding edge, right? Like you throw something in front of a tech and they go, oh, I don't want to change. I like the firewall. And until they start using it and they go, oh, that's pretty cool. I didn't know you could do that. And then it just slowly kind of evolves, right? Like it's, you got to kind of like break the construct of why do we actually need to have a firewall on site? Like, let's start. Like, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that going something so new with a 4-letter acronym that no one really understands or gets, you have to be willing to take the plunge. And if you don't kind of take that plunge and force it down some people's throats, unfortunately, until they accept that there is a change. We are innovating. We are going to be bleeding edge. We are going to be doing something different that no one else is doing. And then they go, oh, wow, this actually does what we need, and it does more than what we need. And that's when the whole team jumps on board, right? And then once that actually happens, we're not having to do certification in 2 different types of hardware firewalls. We're not having to maintain those certifications now because, well, we don't need them anymore. We deal with government as well, and we're already seeing that government's transitioning to SASE. So, like, it's starting to just remove some of the legacy requirements for an engineer to be able to work on something. It's just simplifying it down, and it's removing those barriers. So that means that, do we really need to have 3 network engineers on staff that can do network stuff, or do we just need to have a more higher qualified systems admin that can just do software defined networking? It just changes the concept of how do you deliver your services, right? And that's what you got to be ready to look at. We have been looking at how do we deliver what we need to deliver at the level that we need to deliver, but as simply as possible that we can deliver. That's the part that a lot of people miss out on, I think, and they overcomplicate it. So if we can deliver more complex solutions with less, then there's an ironic overhead drop of labor because you don't need to have that complex skill set anymore. And then you can do more with less. If that makes sense.
No, yeah, I love that. That's brilliant insight. That hits home to what I've been talking about and how I see it as well. Joe, your thoughts? Are your other partners seeing the same kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been, hearing about these zero trust network concepts for probably over a decade. But to your point, just in the last several years, the market has finally built the SaaS model for these services, and we're starting to see the adoption across the market really come to fruition here. So I think, if you're to Milan's point, if you're talking to your customers about the total value and the right things, the solution and the economics can make sense, because let's face it, if you're just looking for a VPN replacement, you compare the cost to your VPN to the SASE solution, you're not going to see the value in the financials there. So you've got to look a little bit deeper, to his point, into the hardware, the maintenance, the ticket, your end user customer experience, the security you're delivering. I mean, most organizations aren't encrypting web traffic back to the network or to cloud applications. And that's one of the biggest ways you can get hacked. If you go to an airport and connect to a fake Wi-Fi network and then go to one of your SaaS applications and plug in your credentials, there's now some credentials on the dark web, and there's some tricky guys out there that can fake MFA codes, and the social engineers are able to get into these networks in very clever ways. So it's really important for not just organizations that have regulatory compliance to do this, but for all organizations that have valued intellectual property to do this, to really protect those users and protect those applications. Because I can tell you, there's not very many businesses out there that don't buy endpoint protection, or they don't buy phishing protection for email security, or do security and awareness training. But most of them aren't doing one of the most common ways that you can get hacked or phished, which is protecting the traffic back to the network and making sure that your users are encrypted and they've got malware security running with them while they're browsing the web. And I think it's definitely changing in the market now, because the economics are making sense for this to start becoming part of the MSP stack. Because what I see a lot of partners doing is they think, hey, I have this client or this particular client that's a good fit. But we're starting to see a lot more partners recommend this and mandate it to all customers. And those are the types of MSPs that are very, very sticky with their customers and can deliver good relationships by showing them what they need versus selling line items on their monthly bill. So very, very looking forward to the future. And I think there's going to be a lot of adoption in the coming years in the small and mid marketplace where I typically work.
Yeah, I think you've actually said something there which was quite interesting, that you mentioned MFA in airports, right? And connecting to a dodgy, duplicated hotspot at an airport. A lot of people don't realize that you don't need MFA to get onto Office 365 or to a secure environment anymore. If you go to an airport and if your traffic has been proxied through, then you've got a copy of the access cookie. You could log in just by copying that cookie across, and it'll bypass the MFA authentication. A lot of people just don't realize this stuff. We have shoved the concept of MFA down the end user's throats so much that we're actually done too good of a job at educating people on MFA, because now people think that MFA is the only thing that is going to protect you, but it's not. And that we're victims of our own success in that. So that's another thing that a lot of people don't think about.
Well, I think you'd be an outlier there, Milan. I've spoken to a lot of partners that still struggle with getting businesses and owners to actually buy into the MFA concept, and even just basic 2FA for the most part. But you're absolutely right. There's multiple ways that people are getting around MFA. Not necessarily just breaking the MFA, but through things like what Joe mentioned, social engineering, phishing attacks, and all that sort of stuff. To gather that information or gain that information. Not to broach on the subject too much longer, but in my mind, MFA is effectively like the locks on your door, right? It's the first point of entry. It's your basic protection, and then you'll have everything else in the back end to sort of do that more later stuff as well. So if you don't have something like standard password and good password management as well as an MFA, it's an easier step into your environment than it would be otherwise. So that's how I sort of break it down into sort of layman's terms. Joe, you mentioned Zero Trust a little bit. First, I guess, give a sort of basic overview on what Zero Trust concepts are, and how Sass-ee and Zero Trust actually work well together.
Yeah. So, well, this is one of the big problems that Sass-ee can truly solve. I mean, we've heard a lot about these high profile attacks in the industry, to where somebody on the network gets hacked, and then all of a sudden they're doing lateral movement attacks and discovering more critical assets on the network, and they're getting complete network visibility. So that's one of the common ways that we're seeing some of these critical enterprise attacks that we hear about in the media happen today. So with this zero trust concept, employers are really starting to, or CTOs and IT administrators and MSPs, security practitioners in general, are starting to build out zero trust and segment out the network. That way that if one particular user that's a part of one business unit gets compromised, the threat actor is not going to be able to see the other network assets. So if there were maybe critical financial systems and ERP systems running, they would be invisible to these threat actors because of the zero trust network. So zero trust is really blocking everything onto the network and having no access, and then coming in, creating policies and making allow lists of users and groups that need to access particular resources, and not giving those users access to other resources on the network or visibility that they don't need access to. So it really solves a big problem with the network segmentation, and delivering another layer of security to help protect against things like lateral movement and securing the network. So that's my 2 cents on it. I don't know if Milan would agree.
There's a great example of that, right? Like, wasn't there a fish tank that got hacked in a casino?
I don't know. I did hear a lot about some Vegas hacks. I was out in Vegas recently, and apparently there a whole handful of the casinos had been hacked in Vegas. But I'm sure we're seeing these everywhere. I didn't see that one in particular, but
I think it was a couple of years ago. Yeah, it wasn't recent. The recent one is a different one, but a couple of years ago, there was a fish, like a pump on a fish tank that was
smart pump or something like that. I heard about that one.
Yeah, that was controlling the temperature of the tank via Wi-Fi or something, and someone was able to connect into it and then able to see from the fish pump the rest of the network. Like, there's a perfect example, right? It just comes back down to proper network hygiene. You want to make sure that your IoT network's not going to touch anything else on your corporate network, your admin network. Like, the larger the organization, the more you start to segment it based on department. But I think that the biggest thing that I think in this realm is that at the end of the day, as the IT provider, you're the person that's the trusted advisor in this sense. And if you're not putting those recommendations to your client and almost even saying, hey, like, the MFA one's a good one, this is what we do. If you don't turn on MFA, well, you can't be our client anymore. Like, you have to be hardline with it. And going back to like Zero Trust Network, like, that is the evolution of VLANing, right? We started as IT businesses creating segmentation by VLAN, and it's getting to the point where maybe there isn't any infrastructure on site that needs to be protected anymore, but you do have 500 computers. You get in on one, you have a foothold on one device because you were at home and your child jumped onto the computer and downloaded a torrent. Now all of a sudden you've got a foothold on that computer. That computer can't see anything else on the network except for a printer because you're at home. The next day you go into the office because you got to work in the office 2 days a week. That computer's turned on, and then all of a sudden it's now saying, oh, wow, there's 500 devices on this network. What can I do with 500 devices? And it starts to look at how do I move laterally across that network? And maybe that lateral movement is to a printer. Like, people don't realize how much a printer can cause an issue these days if you don't update the firmware on it. Like, and that lateral movement is what we're talking about here. We want to prevent that. And zero trust networking does that. It prevents the ability to move laterally across that network, and also, again, removes the burden from us as the IT providers as well. And a lot of times, I don't think a lot of people really consider that. They don't consider what is, like we talk about, like the CIS controls, and in Australia we've got the Essential 8, then you got NIST, you got all these frameworks that are kind of teaching us, hey, you should be looking at this. There's a reason they're trying to say, look at this. Like, it's not, we're not just creating frameworks now for the sake of creating frameworks. We're saying, hey, these are recommended options on how we should protect networks, and zero trust network is one of them. Turn it on because it's going to help you, and it's going to reduce also your overhead in managing that network. But I don't know. I find this is a touchy topic for me because I can get really carried away. So you can stop me at any time.
Yeah, and I can too. And I'll add to that. There was one thing else I wanted to mention that I think is really important, Elliot, is with the zero trust principles, this also incorporates the identity management into the network. So, we're checking that user with the Azure integrations or with the Okta or any of the SAML providers out there. We integrate with them, so we're checking that user's identity, doing the multi-factor authentication, and then we're also checking their devices. So with these zero trust principles, the way that we do it is we also check that device, because first thing that the threat actors typically try to do is they'll try to remove the disk encryption or remove the antivirus. So we'll check for keys and files existing, the antivirus is running, that you've got the backups running. So we'll check to make sure that only secure devices are connecting to the network, which is another one of the big zero trust principles that I don't want to leave out of Sass-ee, because it's just a much easier and simpler way of doing those things than you would traditionally with more of an enterprise setup. And I think, that's one of the big key components. And also there's agentless access. I mean, there's this huge problem out there with business, the BPOs, business process outsourcers, and contracts and third-party companies that you may be doing business with that need access securely to network resources. But if you're not managing their device, they could be behind on vulnerabilities. You don't know if they've got antivirus running. They could have, various different problematic software, crypto miners running. Those things could get exposed onto your network. So with Sass-ee, we could actually deliver these network resources in most cases through an agentless experience, to where we don't need to put these unmanaged devices onto the network, and we can still get them access to applications and resources to work. So it really solves a lot of problems when it comes to contract work, BYOD devices or unmanaged devices that could be a threat to your network, because it's always been a challenge for IT administrators to do this. Like, I was talking to a guy the other day who had an HVAC contractor, because all their HVACing equipment was on the LAN, and they had to give the HVAC contractor access to the network. And it was a worrisome situation. So Sass-ee was a perfect use case for that. And I think those are some of the other key zero trust components that it can deliver as well.
We have, I have a really good example of that. We actually have a few food manufacturing clients, and with like biosecurity and all that stuff that obviously have with consuming food, right? security of like a PLC network becomes quite sensitive. And a lot of the manufacturers of these food manufacturing machines are not in Australia. We're not really good at designing machines in Australia, unfortunately. So we tend to buy them out from other countries and they get shipped here. And then all of a sudden we've got a team that's been flown in from another country to set it up and configure it. But then there's no one in Australia that will be able to ongoing manage this equipment. And then we have to give them access. And that becomes one of those things where we go, wow, we now need to give access to this company that's in Germany to this machine that's going to control the acid levels or the pasteurization of milk before it goes into a process where it becomes cheese. And then you go far out. Now, if something was to happen at that moment, that entire batch of maybe 30 tons worth of cheese is going to be poisonous. Sometimes we don't think about what we're actually doing in these cases, right? And it comes right back to that point. Security only and what they need access to.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that simplifies segregating all the, not just networks, but applications and everything that you actually need access to. I think to break it down in zero trust in a very basic concept is trust no one, authenticate everyone for the most part is basically what we're talking about, right? So, now, some great examples there, and just for time, we'll look at sort of rounding this out. I do have one final question. I might get you guys to do this as part of your sort of final thoughts as well. And I'll start with Milan. Were there any challenges in adopting SASE or presenting these to your clients? And what are your final thoughts to MSPs potentially looking at or considering SASE as a technology they might want to include as part of their stack?
So in terms of friction on uptake, if you're going to have friction internally first, you've got to get past that. You've got to have total buy-in from your team. So implement it internally first is the way I kind of went with it. And then going on to clients is that you just got to be more firm. You need to be talking to, we are the experts. And if I'm not saying go out and just sell it as a product, but if you're the trusted expert in IT and cybersecurity to your client and you're not providing market leading solutions that will prevent potential risks for that organization, then are you doing your due diligence? And by not, it's almost as like not having a backup. In some cases, like if going back to that milk example, like I would be potentially not giving the right advice if I did not provide this solution as an option to that client. And if there was a potential issue, then the insurance company would come to me because I didn't provide the correct advice. So you got to be really firm about what you're delivering and why you're delivering it. Obviously, case by case, like we said at the start of this, don't try to force it down someone's throat if they don't need it. Because if they don't need it, then there's no point in selling it. We're not here just to sell everything. And what was the last part of that? Sorry, I got dragged away with that.
Just that's fine. Just final thoughts. I think you shared them already. To be honest, I think that was a good sort of final thoughts from you and any partners sort of looking at adopting SASE-based technology. So I'll throw things over to Joe. Your same questions for you. Your final thoughts.
Yeah, I think like I mentioned, we're in a very great transitionary period to where the market is finally adopting, and I think partners are starting to look for the education and look for better ways of doing things because, to Milan's point, the progressive partners are out there doing it, and if you're not delivering the cutting edge technology, somebody else can, and it can protect your customer better. So we're doing a lot of education for partners, encouraging them to train their staffs, take technical certifications, and to actually use the product. I use the product every single day. I've connected from multiple continents. I've got a great working experience. And I think just using the product internally is the first step for partners, which is what my job to do, is to help the MSP community adopt these solutions and make it a product that they can deliver to every customer versus just a single few customers here and there. So definitely education and some of the things that Milan says I would agree with, but I do think there's a bright future, and we're going to continue to see more and more adoption as the market continues to mature and progress.
My last 2 cents is
go for it.
We're doing this recording right now, and I'm actually using Sass-ee whilst on this call. So
me as well. So
there you go.
I don't think I am. So I'm the outlier here.
But I won't hold that against you.
And I'll tell you, Milan, we're speaking the language. I'm not split tunneling outside of this application either. So this traffic is going over the VPN. Usually my Teams calls or my Zoom calls, I'm going around the VPN with the split tunnel. So I'm actually on the VPN. So I was surprised here from us joining around the world. Actually, I'm not surprised on how great the call went. So good way to end it here.
Yeah, I'm not split tunneling this either. So.
Thank you, Jets. Joe, I'm going to give you a opportunity to do a quick plug. If partners were looking at Improvement 81, wanted to get a hold of you, how could they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can reach me at joesau@checkpoint.com. And we are a Checkpoint company, so we've got a lot of cool things coming with the product now. So you can reach me. I'm on LinkedIn as well, so you can find me, Joe Saunders, out of Denver, Colorado, on LinkedIn. And feel free to share my contact information. You've got it, Elliot, with any partners, and we'd love to connect. And also, you could just reach out to partners@perimeter81.com if that's easier, and it would get routed to me. So looking forward to hearing from some folks out there. Happy to have any conversations.
Perfect. All right. That's quite a lengthy session. I expected it to be, but no, some great insights for both of you. I really appreciate it. Appreciate having you both on and sharing your insights and thoughts on this. So, again, this is another Cyber Collective podcast. Appreciate you joining. See you in the next one. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Cheers.